I'm recording now. My name is Rebecca Thistlethwaite, and I am the director of the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. We're a unique cooperative extension program that works with niche meat producers and processors all over the country, and we provide them technical assistance, educational resources, networking opportunities, and peer learning experiences. We're housed at Oregon State University Center for Small Farms and Community Food Systems. We put on webinars usually every other month, and we post all of our webinar recordings to our YouTube channel, so go check that channel out. It's just Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. We have over 60 videos on that channel right now. So today's topic was brought to us by the National Pork Board. They sponsored this webinar and helped us come up with the topic and also invite the speakers. So the National Pork Board is going to start off by giving an overview of what kind of resources they can provide to pork producers. And then we're going to go into a panel discussion with a couple niche pork producers themselves. So today we have Todd Rodibaugh, and he is the Director of Producer and State Engagement with the Pork Board, and he lives in Indiana. We also have Chris Jones, who's the Director of Marketing, Promotions, and Partnerships, and he also hails from Indiana. We have a producer, Logan Thornton from Idaho. And then we also have Matt Beach, who is also a producer from the great state of Missouri, also known as Missouri. So we're happy to have them with us. We will reserve about 15 minutes for the audience to ask questions at the end. And we ask that you use the Q&A box and not the chat box to post those questions. That way we can keep track of them and type the answers into the Q&A box. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and pass the mic over to Todd.
Great. Thanks so much, Rebecca. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, Todd Rodibaugh. I am on staff with the National Pork Board as the Director of Producer and State Engagement. So have the privilege of working very closely with producers and our state pork associations across the U.S. Have been with Pork Board for a little over 10 years now, mostly in a producer-facing role, but also I've done some domestic marketing activity involving working with retailers and food service operators across the U.S. Prior to that, spent 5 years in the commercial packing industry and come from a family of pork producers. My father's a swine veterinarian based in the state of Indiana. His family has a long-running seed stock and chow pig operation in Northwest Indiana. In fact, I believe they still hold the record for the longest contiguous family swine sale in the United States. So a small claim to fame for me. Rebecca, confirming you can see my slides okay. I am going to give you a quick overview of the Pork Board, and I like to do just kind of a level set for maybe those that aren't entirely familiar with the National Pork Board or the Pork Checkoff. I'll start off with that, share a little bit on some data-driven insights specifically focused on consumers, and then share a few Pork Checkoff resources that are hopefully applicable to this audience, and then we'll get to the real stars of the show, Logan and Matt. So starting off, I'm illustrating this slide. You see that picture on the right, just to show that there is a long, rich history of producers coming together to address issues and problems of the industry as a collective. So that picture's from well over 100 years ago of producers meeting in a hotel outside of Chicago. And you see the logo in the top left corner, National Swine Growers Council. That was kind of the predecessor to the industry organizations today. And then a quick example of an old retro advertisement that producers put together to promote the industry. The National Pork Board today is based, it has its foundation in the 1985 Farm Bill that was passed by Congress. In that Farm Bill, it had a provision called the Pork Act, and the long form of the Pork Act is the Pork Promotion, Research, and Consumer Information Act of 1985. You can see a screenshot of it right there. Why was this important for the industry? It established the National Pork Board, the organization that we know of today, defined its scope and purpose, which was to enact research, promotion, and educational programs on behalf of the industry. It established the delegate body, which consists of pork producers that annually vote on the checkoff rate and have the vote on the board of directors, as well as give guidance for the organization to work on in terms of industry priorities. Although the National Pork Board is not a governmental organization, we do have government oversight from the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. The Pork Act also made the pork checkoff mandatory. So previously to 1985, all checkoff receipts were voluntary and there wasn't a stable funding to get programming done and work accomplished. And because it's mandatory, then we must do programs that represent all pork producers across the US. So the Pork Board today still uses that Pork Act from 1985 Farm Bill as our guiding principles. The checkoff rate today is 40 cents per $100 of value, or 0.4% when producers market or sell pigs in the US. Again, those checkoff receipts are used for research, promotion, and educational programs on behalf of the industry. Our main offices are in Des Moines, Iowa. There's about 75 to 80 full-time staff members. A few of us are scattered strategically out in the field, including myself. Our board of directors consists of 15 pork producers, and it's stipulated that those producers must be from 12 different states. So get a variety of geography, background, different type of organizations, in production organizations, so that we get a variety of opinions and priorities, ultimately to represent the greater producer population. You see that second to last bullet point, that 100+ number is probably a little undersold. There are a plethora of opportunities for producers to plug in and be involved in the pork checkoff, and we seek that input and opportunities out. And then again, just to underscore, we represent all producers, or try to, with our activities and programs. This is a roster of the current board of directors for the National Pork Board. Again, 15 producers from at least 12 different states. I'll highlight the gentleman here in the bottom left corner, Dr. David Newman. He is actually a meat science professor at Arkansas State, runs a small farm in southern Missouri that direct markets Berkshire hogs. Alicia Pedamonte is from New Hampshire, again, a small niche type producer that does direct marketing up in the New England area. Heather Hill is, she's from Indiana as well, runs a small family pork and grain farm. We also have representatives from larger organizations, some with ties to genetic companies. Gary Asay is from Illinois, he's a contract grower. So I just highlight those individuals to try and illustrate that we have a diverse background for producers that serve on the board. I would be remiss if I didn't share that we're not the only organization working on producers' behalf. So I work with the National Pork Board, represented here by the Pork Checkoff. Again, that's 40 cents per $100 of value for research, promotion, and educational programs on behalf of the entire industry. We work very closely with an organization here on the left called National Pork Producers Council. And although we would call them kind of our sister organization, the important distinguishment is that NPPC, National Pork Producers Council, is funded voluntarily. So they're a membership-based organization. That voluntary investment is 10 cents per $100 of market value. And because it's voluntary, they can use those funds for legislative and lobbying activities on behalf of their members. They do that at the federal level. Pork Board, National Pork Board cannot do any of legislative or lobbying activities. So an important distinguishment there. Maybe we should have this state organization cog in the middle, because they play a key role in working with the national organizations, National Pork Producers Council and National Pork Board, on implementation of programs at the state level. So both Pork Board and NPPC will allocate funds back to the state pork associations. There's about 40 of them total in the US. And then those state pork associations can use those funds for programs and priorities that are important within their state borders. So state associations have the important role of doing both checkoff activities, research, promotion, and education, as well as policy activities at the state and local level. So that's the distinguishment between those three type of organizations working on your behalf. I did want to include my final slide on the overview here is an update on the strategic initiatives for the National Pork Board, because beginning in 2020, we started a new strategic plan that the Board of Directors adopted, and our two main strategic imperatives are to build trust and add value for the pork industry, and specifically pork producers in the US. And you can see those are our strategic imperatives. You can see pillars that programs will fall into, and then ladder up to those big build trust and add value strategic imperatives. Also, the board adopted as part of our key values, this value as consumer focused and producer led. So driving insights on what the consumer needs and is looking for from the pork industry, and then having producers lead programs to meet those needs and ultimately drive value for pork producers. So speaking of adding value, the organization has worked very hard in the last few years to position itself as a thought leader and consultative partner to the supply chain with insights and actions that are grounded in data. So if you look at this chart here to the left, is examples of consumer research. This isn't all encompassing. We still do production-based research and animal science-based research. I'm going to focus on the consumer side here for the next few slides, but working to understand what consumers are hearing, seeing, searching, eating, buying, saying, feeling, and thinking. Now that's a lot of data. That's a lot of information to digest. And so we have worked hard to get experts and insiders to distill that information and filter it down to what's important for the supply chain, and in turn providing action items for our partners, being retailers, producers themselves, food service, allied industry, and packers and processors. And so as you can imagine, 2020 was a pretty unique year, especially for gathering data. There was a lot of change. The consumers were acting differently than what they did before because of macro level issues. No small story of which was COVID. One of the big storylines was retail meat sales were very, very strong. I mean, some unheard of numbers. You see on this slide, meat sales in all retail outlets since the pandemic was declared were up 31% in dollar growth since early March, 18% in pounds. Pork itself was up 30% in dollars and 19% in pounds. Very strong on processed meats too. So those numbers are just unheard of at the retail sector. Not pictured on this slide, but for the entire year for 2020, not just since the pandemic was declared, fresh pork was up over 18% in dollar sales and over 10% in volume. Again, very strong numbers for the calendar year of 2020. And ground pork saw the highest growth rates it's ever seen, at least through the past 3 years. So not surprisingly, since we saw changes in purchasing habits, we also saw changes in consumption. Shoppers were making fewer trips to grocery stores, but they're spending more. In fact, fresh food sales are up 13% year to date, not just fresh meat, but fresh food in general. And this dark square down here in the bottom left-hand corner, 63% of consumers say their meat IQ has improved. Knowledge is better, confidence is better, comfort in making those fresh meat items is better at home, which makes sense, right? I mean, we were grounded at home for a period of time, and many people still aren't getting out, so many more meals are being cooked at home. Yet consumers are not preparing what they typically get in restaurants. So once it opens up, there will still be a role in place for food service operators. Moving down to the green square there and going up diagonally, 50% of shoppers bought different cuts. 50% stated variety is the top reason for buying different cuts, and 60% say they will continue to buy a greater variety. All of those things, all of those stats are good for the pork industry. We have versatile cuts and a bunch of different opportunities, both at the processor, retailer, and really producer level to capitalize upon that. Speaking of the producer level, there was a lot of attention on really the entire supply chain for the pork industry. And if you think to mind early on in the spring, when we had supply chain disruptions, this is not altogether unsurprising, right? Because the pork industry was quite a bit in the news, and we saw through marketplace data that there's a lot of chatter, especially on social, around supply chain transparency. In fact, it was about a quarter more than what it typically was. And when you drill down into that data, specifically the conversations around pork greatly outpaced. So more people were talking about pork supply chain issues than what they were just generally food supply. So consumers, this is a great opportunity for the pork industry. Consumers are curious on what happens in the food supply chain and specifically around pork. And trust and transparency are going to be key drivers of consumers' purchasing decisions as we come out of the COVID pandemic. If you look at the top two boxes here, nearly 50% of consumers stated that authenticity and honesty and clear labeling are extremely important to drive their purchases. So something to keep in mind as we come out of the pandemic. Excuse me, consumers care most. This is very good news for the pork industry and producers. Consumers care most about supporting farmers and knowing their meat came from healthy animals. So continuing the supply chain transparency piece, knowing their purchases support U.S. farmers was the #1 area that consumers felt good about putting their dollars behind. I mean, that's great news and an opportunity for all of us that consumers like American farmers. We know the farm story, and this is not just COVID related, but it continues to be a theme from our research, that the farm story influences purchases at the retail level by consumers. 50% of consumers think about the cleanliness of pigs, and nearly 50% think about what they are fed and how they are raised. And we all know pork producers have a great story to tell when it comes to raising pigs. So with those previous slides in mind, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg, but consumers have signaled what they love, value, and demand from pork. We know this from consumer insights, and Real Pork is the National Pork Board in the pork industry's master brand. It celebrates everything there is about pork. Real stories, real farmers, real farms, real product, in the real way people feel when they enjoy the authentic flavors of pork. We feel pork is flavorful, it's craveable, it provides connections at the dinner table and backyard barbecues, has a very strong farm to fork story that we can capitalize on. Pork is a family meal favorite. It's got a great story in terms of good for me and my family. The nutritional composition of pork is very strong, and farmers are good stewards and believe in sustainability within their communities. This is Real Pork, and these are our brand truths that the organization and industry is working to get behind and capitalize on. These are the proof points that operators can use to differentiate pork based on consumer insights and ultimately meet the needs of customers, their guests, and deliver a great pork experience. This is just a quick example of Real Pork in action and how we're coming to market a little bit differently. This was during the holidays, and we had former top chef Kevin Gillespie, Chef Kevin Gillespie, teamed up with a staff member, Kara Belkey. She is Director of Nutrition and Dietetics at the Pork Board, and we did a satellite media tour around holiday and family meals and how pork can support the family gathering, along with that important nutrition and wholesomeness message. We had 130 airings that reached nearly 5.4 million consumers. So more of this to come as we look to capitalize on pork's story. And this is highlighting the nutritional story, which is obviously a focus for Q1 too, as we think about health and wellness and many people making New Year's resolutions. So I illustrate that and would ask that just keep an eye out for some of this stuff, because there's a lot of exciting work and promotion that's coming down the pipeline and as a priority for our board of directors. So that was kind of a review on consumer insights. And now with the last few slides, I just want to share some Pork Checkoff resources that I think are applicable to this group. And let me forewarn you, it's a text-heavy slides with a bit of an info dump, but follow along with me, and I'll make sure to share these slides with Rebecca afterwards so you can look at them more closely. But the Pork Checkoff does have resources for niche producers or alternative producers. And I just wanted to highlight that website. The link is here. It's got, the website is kind of a one-stop shop for items such as product labeling info. It has links to USDA guidance and a frequently asked questions section. It has links to internal resources around animal care training, which is applicable to any type of production, certification programs like pork quality assurance and transport quality assurance. I think Logan and Matt may touch on those a little bit. And then marketing items too, for those that do direct marketing or have marketing outlets, such as pork cut charts or temperature guides, you know, employing that customer to cook their pork. Don't overcook it, cook it to 145 so they have a good eating experience. And then it also has links to other university resources from land grant universities. So kind of a one-stop shop within our greaterpork.org website. I wanted to highlight the Pork Information Gateway. This is a partnership with an entity called U.S. Pork Center of Excellence. USPCE works really closely with land grant universities and extension networks to compile fact sheets and resources from those organizations. And they have a great repository, again, Pork Information Gateway at porkgateway.org, on a plethora of fact sheets and areas. And I would highlight a couple that may be of interest. They have information for the small and beginning farmer, information on pork quality, marketing, and swine health and reproduction, among many, many others. The last thing I want to mention on this slide is something that's unfortunately not yet available, but it's coming down the pipeline very soon, and I thought was applicable for this group. It's a guide to help think about marketing your pork digitally, and it'll have a lot of resources around search engine optimization, things to think about with Google, YouTube. If you direct market your pork and want to use digital avenues, we think this will be a great tool and provide a resource for you as you consider different options. That's going to be available sometime in mid-February. If you have interest, I've got contact info listed here. Send your name ahead of time or keep an eye on our website and we'll make sure that we get that resource to you. Again, that's going to be called, that's a resource called Marketing Your Pork, focused on a digital marketing guide. Excuse me, a drink of water here. Finally, opportunities to connect with us. I'd be remiss not to mention our state associations. We've got a great network and can have a great network of staff to help connect with you locally. If you're not familiar with your state association, you can find that on our website. I have the direct link listed right there. The pork industry, the National Pork Board is always looking for different opportunities for producer input, and that includes you as producers. Annually, we have task forces that are spun up to work on industry priorities. And so if you're interested, you can log your interests and we will contact you at a later date right there at that direct link, pork.to/taskforce. And then finally, if you're looking for general information, we have our service center number listed there, 1-800-456-PORK. And they are available 5 days a week during normal business hours in the Central Time Zone here to help you. So I just want to make sure that you know if you have questions that the Pork Checkoff is there and willing to help. Rebecca, that wraps it up for me. I will turn it back over to you so we can get on with Matt and Logan.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Todd. Lots of really interesting information. So why don't we start by introducing our two farmers on the panel and giving them a few minutes to share their story and what they do. So why don't we start off with Matt from Missouri. Could you give us a a little history of your farm and what your operation looks like?
Yeah, I'm a 5th-generation farmer from Northeast Missouri. We row crop. We farm about 1,500 acres and 200 cows, and then we run 175 sows, fair to finish, outside on pasture and finish in dirt lots and hoop barns. We are a certified GAP 3 farm, and most of our pigs, I sell all mine through American Pasture Pork, and so they're designated, going to restaurants, food stores, and such like that. But we are certified, with the GAP 3, and then we also are AGA, American Grass Association. I've done the Savory Institute, doing the regenerative farm, and we've also we are all non-GMO certified. So, we're pretty well full scale, as many labels as we can get for our products. And just with every label we get gives you one more niche or one more outlet for the products that we're doing. We're finishing about 3,500 to 4,000 head a year outside on grass.
Wow, that's fantastic, Matt. I used to raise about 350 a year, so it
keeps us pretty busy and keeps us from getting in trouble. Like I said, whenever you're bedding huts and everything like that all the time. So yeah, no, it's been a profitable deal. It's kept the farm sustainable. Sustainable could be profitable, but it's given it where, like I said, there'll be room for the next generation to come in and hopefully be a 6th and hopefully a 7th going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Now I'm going to move on to Logan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Logan Thornton from Idaho. We're 2nd-generation pig farm here right by the Boise area, kind of in the southwest part of the state. We have about 270 sows on our farm. Most of that is purebred Berkshire. We market the Berkshire pork to a lot of restaurants, kind of food service. And then we do show pigs, a lot of just local. We work with a lot of local packers here in our area to get a lot of just custom pigs. If someone needs a custom pig, we deliver them and send them. So kind of a combination. We finish in straw bedded hoop barns, and gestation is in straw hoop barns. Our farrowing and nursery are kind of more conventional pig farming that you'll see. So it's kind of a combo sort of thing that's worked best for us here at our farm, and we hope to be doing it for a long time. So it's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan. So I've got some questions here pre-prepared, and I'm going to pick out a person to answer the question, or ask all of you the same question. But why don't we start off with you, Logan, since you're unmuted. What are some of the ways you have used information from the checkoff to impact your farm and business?
Well, I feel just all the information that Todd gave us has just been so helpful. I think if the work that they're doing, providing demand for pork on a large scale, means there's demand for pork on anyone's scale, is just how I take all that information. So the access they have to large amounts of data and all the things on demand and what people are looking for can always help any producer at any level. So that's one way. And just the way that, like Todd, he's come out to our state a couple years ago, that they bring that information to us, and that's just very helpful to help us to know where the demand is and how we can kind of capitalize on that information.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Matt? What are some of the ways you've used info from the checkoff to impact your farm and business?
Oh, we'd like to reiterate what, like Logan said. Anytime that they're out promoting a product, pork, whether it's a niche market, the commodity market, but, anytime you're promoting pork as a product, consumers, they're putting it first level. The cooking instructions, the little recipes, that's what it's kind of a fun that, you know, they would put out in the pork magazines and other stuff. You'd see recipes and different stuff to try. And, you know, we've had neighbors and like, oh yeah, I saw this recipe, tried it. And, you know, we sell a lot of pigs, you know, kind of what Logan does. We do a lot of pigs local too. You know, we probably sell a couple hundred a year to local, just butcher shops for neighbors to fill their freezers. And so with the pork council, you know, they're always out there putting the brand the first, you know, it was the other white meat. And, you know, now they're moving on to new slogans and stuff. But with the checkoff, you know, they're also, you know, trying to build new markets, you know, whether it's overseas, you know, a lot of our stuff stays domestic, but the overseas market is definitely growing. So with the checkoff and anytime they're promoting our product, you know, they're working for us. And as far as, you know, basically they're the salesman. I'm really good at raising pigs and really good at trying to, you know, I can promote it, talk to brands, somebody can come out to the farm. I don't have time to be a salesman. And that's where the Pork Checkoff comes in. They're our salesman for us, is, you know, promoting our products.
Awesome. Maybe Todd or Chris could answer this question. How does the checkoff support direct to consumer sales efforts? You know, do you have any special, I don't know, marketing materials or materials that help consumers figure out how to buy a whole animal or a half animal and how to get it cut up and work with their butcher? Or what other ways do you support direct to consumer sales?
Yeah, Rebecca, that's why, excuse me, that's why I mentioned that marketing your pork digital resource. I'm excited. I think that's going to be a good guidebook as we think about opportunities to leverage the digital marketplace, which all signs point to increased opportunity for the pork board, for pork producers rather. And you combine that with the impacts of COVID and the curiosity of the general public of connecting with the producer and transparency in the supply chain, I think all that ladders up into opportunity. So I think that is certainly a resource. And there are others. It's not just the pork board either. There are university extension networks, as you well know, with similar resources that we can work right along with in partnership too. So, and I understand also that everybody's situation is a little bit different. You know, Logan markets pork a little bit different than what Matt does. And some of those production attributes may be different. And so I say that because as you consider, as our attendees consider the needs that they have, I would encourage them to reach out to their state pork association with those questions. So then we can work to connect resources at the national level and state level back to those producers.
Is that the best way for niche producers to engage and say they have a resource that they would like you to help create, that they first contact their state association and that kind of filters up, or should they go directly to you?
It's, you know, really it's up to the individual. Certainly if they have a relationship with the state association, which typically is the more frequent avenue, then they would be more than welcome to do that. But they certainly would be welcome to contact the National Pork Board, whether our team directly or through the number and email that I mentioned earlier. So there's no wrong answer to that, Rebecca. Whatever the individual's most comfortable with, we'll get the information to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd. Logan, I have another question for you. So I know you market finished hogs and you also market show pigs and work in that industry. How does the checkoff support you in both areas?
Kind of the checkoff's been a big supporter of organizations and shows through like the National Swine Registry, and they work well with them in their efforts to promote getting pigs that are raised in a good way into kids' hands. I think that's a big part. I used to, when I kind of started, I didn't see the kind of association between a kid that just raises show pigs and how that can transition into being part of the commercial industry. But through Pork Board, I've met many, many people that their only experience in pigs was starting to show them as a kid. And then that transitions into college, that transitions into I mean, one person I have in mind is Kyle Coble, who I met through a Pig Farmer Tomorrow program through the National Pork Board. His only experience was raising show pigs, and now he got his doctorate in nutrition and now works for a huge swine organization as their main nutritionist. So also the youth quality care assurance programs, they help teach kids how to humanely treat their animal, care for their animal, and all those things. And the Pork Board gives many resources for that to get people all across the U.S. certified to give those to any kids exhibiting animals. So, and I mean, it also, having good association with kids, they become good caretakers of pigs and then become great consumers of pork later on because they have that tie to the industry. So as many kids in any way that I can get a pig in their backyard or at their neighbor's yard if they live in a subdivision or something, that's a big part of what I like to do here. And it's a great way to impact a lot of youth.
Awesome. I know back when I used to raise pigs that I used a lot of Pork Board resources on consumer demand and what cuts were hot and kind of just different formats for cutting my animals. And I would use that information to take it to my processor and figure out the best way to cut, also depending on the time of the year and what demographics of consumer I was selling to. You know, if it's a family, maybe they want roasts. If it's single people, maybe they want sausages, you know, stuff like that. Found it immensely helpful. Matt, do you use any of the sort of consumer facing information or market information to help you determine how to market your animals and how to have them cut up?
Yeah, we used to try to do some where we used to sell cuts and everything, and we always joked about if you could make a hog all bacon, you'd be rich. I mean, because bacon was the first cut that ever moved, then pork chops and hams was, you know, surprisingly when we first started doing it, marketing cuts, hams was the hardest cut to move. Yeah. And you know, for myself, I'd rather have a ham steak, you know, than a beef steak. But I mean, you know, everybody consumers differences, and so that's what we've had to do with our group. Is you know we sell a lot of cuts and stuff. So what the hams we've had to do is just try to figure out, you know, we've turned them into sausages. You know, we've also started a brat program, which flies great during the summer, you know, with the grill. This year it actually, you know, everybody's had a struggle this year with COVID and the pandemic, you know, because the restaurants weren't open. You know, we didn't have the family gatherings, you know, everybody was social distance. So it's been a struggle this year. We've actually had other stuff pile up. And then, you know, we've worked through it, you know, as far as cuts and stuff. So it's, you know, and it kind of changes every year, you know, as far as, you know, the consumer demand, but bacon's always been the first one and the easiest one to move. And so we've had to just figure out different cuts. You know, with the brat program was a new one we've started. It's something that's a little different. You know, we've had to do some cheese brats and we've added flavors to try to, you know, everybody knows the Johnsonville. And so we're trying to compete with a better quality product and stuff. But that's the main thing is just keeping our meat, you know, our stuff, you know, as far as we're trying to, you know, we go off the slogan of quality over quantity. And so that's the reason with the niche market, you know, we try to keep our quality up, you know, with marbling and everything in the pigs so that our cuts, maybe, you know, a consumer will keep buying our stuff and then maybe let some of the others, you know, the chickens and other stuff to kind of go through. So we could keep going through and making sure everything's, keeps fresh and going.
How about you, Logan? Have you used any of the Pork Board consumer information about how to get your animals cut up and sell to different demographics?
Yeah, we really push that 145 because I get calls all the time and people say, well, yeah, I don't really want the pork chop, you know, and that blows my mind. And most of it is just old thinking and stuff. They're used to these really thin pork chops that just get overcooked and dry, and mom maybe just put applesauce on it and then you eat it, you know. That's a lot of people's kind of experience. So we get a lot of the promotional materials, the posters and things we put up on our farm. I try and post them on our Facebook and do some of that too, encouraging people, get them cut a little thicker, cook them right. And in my experience, a pork chop is just an amazing eating experience if done correctly. You can do it a lot of different ways, but that temperature and whatever seasoning you want. So that's kind of what we focus on. I was on the phone yesterday with someone who they've never done a custom pig before. So I referred them to a couple different resources, encouraged them the 145 and learn more about that. So even my grandma struggles with cooking pork to 145 still, because just old time thinking, and pork you need to be careful with and really cook the heck out of it. So that's kind of the big one. I think that's kind of been a game changer for pork, focusing on that and really getting people to have a better eating experience with pork.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to ask you and Matt a couple questions about how you are adapting right now. So start off with you, Logan. How have you had to pivot during COVID, and what opportunities or markets have shriveled up, and what new ones have opened up for you?
So about when COVID started, things were okay for us. We kind of pivoted to, a lot of our animals go into California to food service and restaurants. So obviously that shut down. And but at the time there were a lot of space in our kind of local butcher. We probably have 4 or so that we work with kind of in the close area that we were able to sell a lot of just custom pigs to people. So that helped out. Kind of this second wave, our production was really high this fall. We had a real large inventory, and the second kind of shutdown of California has really hurt us. So we scrambled, and that's another reason I appreciate the pork board and just meeting other industry members. I was able to kind of put out a call across the country. We were able to sell a big load of Berkshire pigs all the way to Ohio, of all places, from Idaho. So, but through that, now things are kind of settling back down, but we were able to get through and not have to make any drastic decisions on our farm. So, but local stuff, as everyone's experiencing throughout the country, you just call up your local custom butcher and they'll say, well, call me next year and we'll see where we're at. So luckily we've been lucky with working with one in particular here locally, but we just having a network of people to call that can call someone else and then call someone else and work through it has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, have a plan A, B, and C, right? How about you, Matt? How have you had to pivot?
Well, I think like Logan mentioned, we sell a lot to local custom butcher shops, and I kind of saw what was coming and made some appointments to be able to keep the locals, the hogs we sold local into the locker appointments, and we've got through that first wave, and now we're backed up over a year and a half, 2 years. We've made appointments out all the way up into 2022 already for producers. So we've put into lockers appointments for pigs that we already don't even have on the ground yet. But you have to, because they're backing up. For the majority of the hogs, when we send them out east to get processed, the workers dealt with COVID. So we try to shoot for a live weight of 320 to 330. Well, we'd get back up a week or two, and next thing you know, we're shipping 360, 70 pound pigs, and so the cuts got a little bit bigger. We had to worry about putting less pigs on the trailer, and so we got backed up. We're through the backlog now, but everything that I experienced, we were fortunate enough we never had to euthanize any animals. We had enough space and space outside, where some of the confinement operations, they had to make some pretty drastic decisions. Luckily, we didn't have to do that. But what we had, a lot of our stuff, our markets were a lot of restaurant based, And so we had to do an about face real quick and get into some grocery store businesses to direct the meals direct to the home sales. We've been in talks with some companies like that, of getting our product, putting it into a straight meal delivery service. And so, I think it's like with any business, whether it's pork business and, selling widgets or whatever. If you've got to be able to adapt on the run. It was a struggle getting everything, the labels changed and stuff ready to go. But now that we've got everything going, we're barring another major shutdown of the packing plants, that backs us up, for some circumstances we can't control. I think we're headed in the right direction. It's just a matter of being able to quickly change, think about it, and make a wise decision, but then still know that we may have to come back to because the restaurants are going to open up. We'll get this problem fixed, or hopefully we get it fixed. And so we'll have to come right back into supplying the restaurant businesses, so, consumers are going to kind of, pivot which direction we're going to really put a lot of focus into, where the demand's at.
Mm-hmm. And have you worked with any like online retailers, Matt?
We've had some we're in talks with. A lot of it is just getting contracts in place. It's the contractual stuff. The demand is there, but it's jumping through the hoops, and getting the USDA stuff right on it and the labels. And it would be nice to be able to just click your fingers and make it work. But there's some steps and processes that we're going through. But, a lot of it, I think these companies are looking at doing the home delivery meal service and online sales. If they're going to put that money resources into it, they want to make sure it's a wise decision, and something that's going to be long lasting and not just a 6-month short-term deal. You don't want to put a lot of focus into something and find out that once the COVID concerns, get relieved, or people's been so tired of being cooped up for the last year and a half, are they just going to go straight out to restaurants and never stay home? And so then the online sales. But I think there's a portion of the country that, with Noelle, we shop at Hy-Vee a lot, and she does a Hy-Vee pickup. It's pretty easy to phone in. Its groceries are ready and come in. And I think the convenience of online shopping, in-store pickup and stuff, it's going to change the focus of how grocery stores and a lot of companies go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are good points. I wanted to open it up to the audience for questions. If people don't come up with any, I still have some more that I could go through. But if anyone who's watching the webinar wants to pop your question into the Q&A box, we have time for that. And I encourage you to enter them in there. While we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, and some other questions I have for Matt and Logan, and actually Todd and Chris as well. What kind of consumer trends, kind of irrespective of COVID, so let's pretend like COVID didn't happen, we're back in 2019, right? What kind of consumer trends are you seeing around pork and the different cuts and the different formats, and also, maybe the different breeds, how much marbling or fat? I know for a long time it was lean, lean, lean. And then thankfully we've rediscovered that fat is healthy for us. So now we're allowed to have fat on our pigs again. But what other sort of trends are you seeing in normal times? Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd start on that. We run a Hamp, Duroc, York cross. So we bring in, Hamp boars, save our gilts back out of that. Then we run Duroc. So we're running a 3-way cross, but we're really focused on marbling. Like you said, that's the reason I think in our niche markets, we went from selling 3 years ago, having demand for about 1,500 pigs. In 3 years, we've tripled. And the demand's only getting more big, is getting larger and larger. And I think a lot of it comes from a meat quality standpoint, the marbling. We focused on, again, that quality over quantity. And so the consumers, that's what the local lockers and stuff that we've worked with is people have gotten a half a pork and have commented back like, we haven't had pork that good since the 70s. And so, or back when we were growing up. And so I think with the genetics that we're running, in focusing on meat quality, at least our little niche, my little focus and world, we've just kept expanding. And I mean, and we're getting more and more demand. I've maxed out what I can physically do at my farm, and still keep stuff. But so we're looking at, I've got a couple of young kids that have come on, that's in college, looking about expanding and looking at being able to add some diversification to the farm. And outdoor pigs, I mean, it's a lot of work, but there's some good profit in it. There's a PIA factor to it, but I mean, it's worth, for everything. But yeah, our markets keep growing, at least in our little niche world. We've been pretty focused pre-COVID. Now through COVID, it's about flattened out. But I think once everything kind of gets, we get through this glut, I think that, our markets, at least what we're forecasting, is just going to keep growing.
Awesome. Good to hear, Matt. How about you, Logan?
I'd say a lot of the same stuff. Everything's growing. I think focusing on a breed like we do Berkshires is kind of our focus. So focusing on a breed like that they kind of have their own reputation, but also being able to improve upon it. And when we got into kind of a bind, like the last couple months, that you have a product, it's pretty easy to go to someone and say, hey, we got a good product, and to be able to move those pigs. And like Matt has a reputation for having a good quality product, helps you when you do get into a bind like that, I think. So being able to focus on Berkshires, focus on meat quality and eating experience, then lends you to broader opportunities, and you can kind of put your stamp on that pig and know it's gonna perform wherever it goes. So that's been a big help for us.
Awesome. A couple questions have come in. Kimberly asks, what benefits would a retail store get from joining the Checkoff? Todd or Chris?
Yeah, I can jump in there. From a retail standpoint, it's not a matter of joining the Checkoff, because it's the fees are paid through the producers. However, we do have a lot of channel marketing folks that could engage. We offer solutions like POS kits or signage. We have some of the posters and such that could go in the back room for folks that are learning about the cuts and such. So we do have a lot of those types of resources that can be very useful for that retail store and the associates there. And again, as Todd mentioned, certainly reach out, and we can certainly get you connected with the right folks at the Checkoff to get you those materials and things.
And Chris,
if I could just
ahead.
piggyback on there real quick, Chris, the benefit is Pork Board will help a retailer sell more pork, and that benefits the whole supply chain, right? We know from our research, a consumer that puts pork in their basket has a higher ring than a consumer or a customer that doesn't. So that benefits, everybody all the way down to the producer. So those kind of market insights that I was referencing earlier are available through the Checkoff.
How about Chris, do you have like training resources for employees, like videos, or I don't know, do you ever come and actually teach store staff, say it's a big chain or something, teach them how to cook and merchandise the different parts of the animal?
Typically, we typically have not done that. We do have some resources that we can provide. There are some videos that we do have access to that we can provide, but we haven't typically gone in and done the training ourselves, at least not since I've been at the Pork Board. But there are things that we can work together on, given that we work with AMSA and other organizations as well. We can make sure that we're getting the right types of materials into the hands of stores and associates as well.
Awesome. Let's see. Leah asks, this may be outside the scope of our panel, but are other protein groups, probably other Checkoffs, undertaking similar efforts to engage and elevate the niche segments of their industry, like the beef Checkoff or poultry Checkoff? Todd or Chris, do you know if they're focusing on niche as much as you guys are?
So I can say from a commodity standpoint, Pork Board, one of the jobs that I have is to actually work across checkoff organizations and commodity boards, whether it be protein or other areas as well. And so working with groups like the North American Meat Institute, we've partnered together with the Beef Checkoff, for instance, to put together the meat demand monitor through Kansas State, where we can look at what various cuts are doing, consumer research, et cetera. So I know there are some efforts that are being done there. I can't speak specifically to poultry or beef in terms of direct things, but I can say that we're working hard to work collaboratively across commodity groups.
Well, I think even just having a link on your website that's like all things niche pork related is pretty amazing. And I haven't dug into the Beef Checkoff website as thoroughly, but I have not seen that level of resources available for niche producers in that segment. So I applaud you guys for making a concerted effort to reach all segments of the pork industry. I think that's great. Let's see, Joe asks, for small producers in regions that do not have USDA processing facilities close, do you see co-ops and mobile slaughter units as good path to getting access to niche markets? Why don't we ask Matt and Logan, and I can respond as well afterwards. Do you guys think that there's any opportunity there to, I know you both struggle now to get processing slots. What kind of opportunities do you see? How about Logan?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the beginning of COVID, I didn't mention, we did have a USDA packer we were working with, and then they kind of dropped everyone locally that was supplying them. So there's been a lot of that, people accessing cheaper pigs, different things. So that's been a concern. But I think, and what I've heard through our state, and we've worked with our state association and Farm Bureau, trying to talk to work with state legislators on kind of working on state inspections, working through them to be able to have a way for producers, if it's in the state, be able to sell to people in your state, and maybe change some things as far as USDA is concerned. I know us personally at our farm are working on kind of big goals of building our own sort of facility. So that's hopefully in our future. But I think there's a lot of work we can do through our state associations and stuff like that to work with the state legislatures to allow people more access to your pork, to those that don't want to just buy a whole custom pig. So I think there's opportunities there. I've heard state of Washington has some things going this year in their legislature to sort of change some of that stuff. So
how about you, Matt? Do you have any thoughts about that, about opening up processing capacity?
Yeah, that's what our local locker that we've really dealt a lot with, they've looked at expanding, but it's like with anything, going through the hoops and the regulations. And so they were under the impression and they were looking into it. There's some USDA grants now for the kind of a food security, portion of, opening up a new locker, with stuff being backed up a year to year and a half or more, there's the demand is there for local processors and food security, and that's what the idea of the pasture to plate. I work with a lady, that's taking some stuff, and her business was kind of on the idea of the slogan of from the pasture to the plate. Buying local, processing local, and so what you're doing. And it was really going good till COVID hit, and it's still going good. The demand's there. There's just not the ability to get the production there as far as the animals slaughtered and then packaged and to the consumer. The demand's there. She just can't get the appointments at the locker. And so that then if you could build a facility, then you got to get the USDA inspectors involved, which is not a big deal. Then it's getting the work, hiring the work staff to show up, somebody to manage it, and so it creates a headache. But the demand is there, and anytime the demand, I mean, we've got a couple groups that are looking at building other facilities that are local. So hopefully that, once we get it going, they get going and get some ground broke, because I really think that even where we're in a rural area, there's a majority of the people, they want to buy local, and know the food security. And I think it's getting more and more even to the urban sprawl of, food security and knowing where it's coming from and, buying local. And I think, hopefully there's a demand there if we can just fill the void of the locker capacity, the what we don't have right now, we need more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just wrap up by saying, our website, nichemeatprocessing.org, has a plethora of resources if someone is considering building a new facility. We have templates and guides for writing a feasibility study, for writing a business plan. We have design guides for how to actually design the space. We have case studies of successful models and not successful, unsuccessful models, both mobile and brick and mortar facilities. Small to mid-scale on our website. So all of that's there. And then I'm also available for 30-minute consultations for people who are contemplating building a new facility. So that's my job. That's what I do every day. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. I really want to thank the Pork Board for sponsoring this webinar. It's been really interesting. I've learned a lot. I'm definitely going to do some more digging on your website, and I really want to see that guide to digital marketing. I think that'll be a fantastic resource. So thank you, Matt and Logan, for taking time out of your day. I'm glad to hear that things are picking up in your businesses and there's demand for your pork. And with that, I'm going to sign out and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.